All right, thanks everyone for joining us for this week's VIX Service Live video. We are also opening this week's video up to the rest of the membership at Elliott Wave Trader to give a preview of our weekly VIX video service here in the VIX room at Elliott Wave Trader. So just a quick overview of what we do in this video every week. So we take a look at the counts on the VXX. We also look at the counts on the VIX Futures and Spot VIX. Also take a look at the ZIV, which is inverse volatility product. It uses the futures, VIX futures a little bit further out on the curve. And we'll take a quick look at the SPX count as well. So getting started here, the count on the VXX, and this is something that we've been reviewing in the VIX room for, we update this chart every day in the VIX room, and it's a count that we keep regularly. So I'm counting the VXX currently in a very similar pattern as what we're seeing on the SPX. So from the October low that was struck here at the 2587 low, I've got an ABC up into the 5207 high. And I'm counting this, my primary count at this point in time is that this was an A wave. So I've got ABC up for an A wave, and then I've got ABC down for a B wave. And ideally, I'm looking for a larger wave C back up over the 5215 high. So that's my primary count. So A, B, C down for a large B wave, looking for a large C wave back up over the 5215 high. The way I'm counting this A down, I've got A, B, and then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if we dissect this 5-wave move down off of this 4249 high, we can see this follow our Fibonacci pinball pattern very cleanly here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this wave 3 hit the 200 extension almost to the penny at 29.15. It hit the 100 extension for resistance for wave 4 at 34.58, almost to the penny. And then reversed lower and made a new low. Both of these levels I was pointing out in real time in the VIX service. I noted this 29.15 level and I noted this 34.58 level. This is a major pivot that I was watching. We were long in the VIX room. Most of this move up after this initial move up off the lows, we got long here, and I was watching this as a major pivot here at this 34.58 level. Because it was such an ideal Fibonacci pinball level, and those are always noted in yellow on my charts. So I was watching this 34.58 level. It did not break there. When it turned down right at that level, that 34.58 level was really a signal that this may need another low, and indeed it did. So we had a very sharp reversal back up off this 34.58 low. We did make a new low, and now I'm looking for signs of a bottom to complete this larger degree wave B. We don't have that signal of a bottom just yet. Right now, the move up off this low is corrective in nature, so we don't have a signal that we've struck a bottom just yet, and I am still looking for ideally one more low prior to a bottom being struck. This can be seen on our 15-minute chart, and also this is following a fairly clean Fibonacci pinball pattern down off of the highs that were struck here at 3.8. So I've got 1, 2, 3. It looks like we're in a fourth wave now, looking for one more low to get this final wave 5 of C of B. This also hit the 200 extension, broke below it just a bit, and then moved higher again. And this move off of this low is clearly corrective at the moment. So I really don't have a good signal that we've struck a bottom just yet. It's very possible that today's high of the day was indeed all of the microwave 4 here, looking for another low to strike somewhere in the 24.54, potentially down as low as 26.18 prior to striking a bottom for a wave 5 of C of B. We also could see one more push higher for a wave C of 4. Under that case, I'd be looking for a move back up over today's high of the day, but holding under 30.06 to 30.58. Moving through this 30.06 to 30.58 level is the initial signal on the micro standpoint that we may have struck a bottom, and potentially that we may have struck more of a lasting bottom. If we break through this resistance zone, this 30.06 to 30.58 zone, prior to making a new low, it complicates the count because it would give us a 3-wave start. Under this case, I'd have to really then be looking at this yellow count a little bit more seriously, because for this to have bottomed in this B wave, I need a 5-wave move to start this large C wave to the upside, because our C waves always need to start with 5 waves. If we break through that resistance zone prior to getting another low, it really starts to make this look like we may be dealing with this yellow count. Under the yellow count, I'm looking for a corrective retrace for wave 2 into the mid 30s, potentially as high as 40, prior to starting a larger wave 3 to the downside. And that fits with the count that we're watching on the SPX, this yellow count on the SPX, which has all of wave 4 bottoming here in December. And this is a 5-wave move to the upside, looking for wave 2 with a corrective retrace for wave 2 / B on the SPX. This yellow count on the VXX fits with that potential on the SPX. So again, looking at the smaller time frames, ideally I want to see one more low to reset the count here, so we can get a nice clean 5 up off the lows. Getting a 5 up off the lows, that opens the door to this having bottom in all of this wave B. If we don't get a full 5 up off the lows, it gives us a corrective start to this move, which makes it unlikely that we're going to see a large C wave to the upside, and it makes it more probable that we're dealing with this yellow pattern here. Bigger picture resistance, once we get through that 30.58 zone, I'd then be looking for a move back over 34.58. This is still a resistance on the larger time frame, so that would be the larger degree resistance zone. If we can get through there, then that opens the door. If we can get through there, especially on a 5-wave move, a large 5-wave move through this 34.58 level, then that really opens the door to seeing a large C wave up. And I'd want to see this happen in phases. So I'd want to see a new low here, struck here on this under the Friday's low. I then want to see a full 5-wave move up, followed by a corrective retrace lower, giving us a 1-2, and that would really set up a nice strong move up back up over the 52.15 level. This would be the ideal way for the ideal path for this to take. There'll be several opportunities to trade this along the way. This move up here should subdivide into 5 waves. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Corrective retrace for wave 2. So we potentially have opportunities to get long here, and again long here. Again, looking for this move up over 52.15. But that's what I want to see to give us confirmation that we've indeed bottomed in all of wave B. If we do not see that, if we see a corrective move up off the lows, then again, it signals that something else is in play, potentially this yellow pattern. Again, I really need to see 5 up off the lows to suggest we've bottomed in all of wave B. Now, I pointed this out in the VIX room today. I want to point this out here as well. When we make a bottom in the VXX, it's unlikely. It's not highly. It doesn't occur very often where we get a very flat corrective pattern that strikes a larger degree bottom on the VXX. So this is a very flat corrective move here. As we can see on all these other times when the VXX struck a fairly significant bottom, as noted by all these green arrows here, it was a fairly sharp reversal. So we had a sharp move higher and then a retrace. So here we had a sharp move higher and then a retrace. Here we had a sharp move higher than a retrace, sharp move higher than a retrace, sharp move higher than a retrace. Again, it's consistent with all of the significant lows here. This low so far is it's a flat corrective pattern. It doesn't have the same characteristic that we see on a lasting bottom on the VXX. So this to me is giving us further evidence that we still likely need one more low prior to even breaking over 30.58. I think it's unlikely we're going to break 30.58 without getting that one more low. If we do, it again complicates the count. It opens the door to it being several other patterns, the yellow count certainly being in play there, but it makes it much less probable that we're going to see a larger bottom of this B wave if we don't get one more low with a strong reversal off of the next fib. All right, so let's take a look at the VIX futures. We're coming up on VIX OPEX, where our VIX futures roll here on tomorrow. Tomorrow, right? Yeah, tomorrow. They're usually roll on Wednesday, but they're rolling on Tuesday this week because of a holiday. So VIX futures roll tomorrow. So currently March, the VXX is currently composed of 4% March futures and 96% April futures tomorrow. the VXX will be composed of 100% April futures. So for the next week or so, the VIX will be heavily driven on what happens with the April futures. As we can see, spot and March are right on top of each other as we approach the expiration tomorrow morning. Decent sized little gap here between April and spot, so we need a fairly decent move here up on spot to really get things started. Spot's at 13.10, so it's fairly low. It's lower than it's been in a while. We had a low of 1247 last week, and it's kind of grinding down, and it's more of in its normal bullish state where we have a fairly decent sized gap between the futures and spot, where spot is trading below futures. As we can see, when we had our volatility back in December, spot was trading well above futures, and that's not the norm. When we're in a bullish market. When we're in a bullish market, spot's typically trading below futures, both the front and the near month, and that's where we're at right now. So we need to get things kind of perky again on spot to get things rolling again on the futures. And we have a fairly decent sized gap here right now between spot and futures. So ZIV is a inverse volatility product. It uses futures contracts further out on the curve. So it's not quite as volatile as some of the other inverse volatility products, but I like to take a look at it sometimes just to give us additional confirmation where we're at in the counts. This is tracing out a fairly similar count to what we're seeing on the VXX. I've also got this as an ABC up. This fourth wave was fairly deep. It just barely held on to the bottom end of support here, but it did hold, and it's trying to make a new high here. Like the VXX, I would prefer to see this break back up over the 76.69 level to give us additional confirmation of a top here for this wave 5 of C. But this is also tracing out the same pattern that we're seeing on the VXX. So nothing unusual here as well. And again, I'd like to take a look at this to give additional confirmation where we're on the VXX. When things are more stable, we're in a more bullish market, sometimes I'll trade this. But for the moment, I'm just using it to give us some additional guidance on the VXX. So SPX, as I noted, and I've noted this in the room as well, I'm watching one of two counter on the SPX, which fits fairly closely to what I'm watching on the VXX. I've got this in one of two counts. I've got this as an ABC and on this white count, which is still my primary at this point in time. So once this tops, I'm looking for a sharp move lower back down for a C wave, back under the 23.45 low that was struck in December. And the alternate count would be this yellow path here, which would suggest we're topping in a wave 1, looking for a corrective retrace for wave 2, which then be followed by a large third wave to the upside over the next couple of years for as part of wave 5. So again, this fits fairly well with what we're seeing on the VXX as well. And again, I'm really going to take my cues on how the next move to the downside on the SPX starts and upside on the VXX starts. So if we get a clean 5-wave move to the downside, it really is suggestive that we may be dealing with this white pattern, and we can really start to get more aggressively short or long the VXX. If we see a fairly clearly corrective move to the downside, then it's more suggestive that we are in this yellow pattern, and at that point we can start to look for long entries on the equities and short on the volatility products. Okay, so that is a quick overview, kind of covers where we're at with things on the VXX at the moment, volatility. I'll go ahead and open up to any questions that you have now. You can either type your questions in the questions box, or you can raise your hand if you have a microphone and ask your questions that way. All right, 60-minute chart, piercing bottom of blue box. Does it mean that count is no longer likely? What is the lower limit for the blue box? Okay, 60-minute. No, this is a target zone this was the ideal target zone. So 76.4 retrace to 88.6 retrace. Ideally would have liked to have seen that hold, but based on our fibs from our wave B top here, we're still well within the realm of reasonable fibs. So we've got our 200 extension, our 238.2 extension here. I really would want to see it hold 2668, which is a 100 extension, as well as just below this 2708 level, which is the 238.2. So that's the ideal level to hold. Zooming into the 15-minute chart, I've got 2754 and 2702. So again, I've got some major fibs right around that 27 area. So decent confluence right around 27. That would be the ideal level I'd like to see hold at this point. If we start breaking below 27, it opens the door up to this starting to break down back below the 2587 low that was struck back here in October. So 27-ish is really the ideal spot I want to see this hold at this point. Best to go with VXX call options near 1-year lows of 26. I typically don't like to get into to buy options until we see some confirmation of a low in place. And that usually typically comes in the form of a 5-wave move, which we don't have just yet. And I will note though, when I see that 5-wave move and a setup to the upside, I will note those in the VIX room. And we have trade alerts that I will note. As I will also note, I'll also lay out the option strikes and what the returns look like in the VIX room as well when I see those setups. How does the rollover affect the price of the options? It doesn't directly affect the price of the options. The options will just lose value as the underlying moves against the price of the option, but it doesn't directly affect the option price. How likely is it to see a LD, a leading diagonal, to begin at wave C? Leading diagonals are very unreliable. Sometimes we see them to begin a wave C, sometimes we don't. I can't say that, I can't put a percentage on it. This does not look like a leading diagonal to me though. It's too flat. So even under leading diagonal, I'd still need to see it pointing a little bit higher, right? And this is just too flat right now to be a leading diagonal. So I don't think we have a leading diagonal just yet. How the rollover of futures tomorrow affect the option price? I think I just answered that. Do you typically see a move in vol prior to the indexes? It seems that way at the September. Sometimes volatility will move, will bottom prior to the indexes topping, and sometimes it won't. I did a study on this a while ago, and it's not consistent. Sometimes volatility will bottom before the index markets, and sometimes the index markets will top before volatility bottoms. How low can the VIX go? How do you usually trade the VIX and the VXXB? The lowest the VIX has ever been, I believe, was February of 2008, and I believe it got into the 8s, if I'm not mistaken. We typically trade the VXX. We typically trade the volatility using the VXX, both options and straight shares. I'll point those setups out in the VIX room. Again, both options and straight shares with target stops, entry levels in real time. I will also use a options workup, what I call it, and it lays out all of the different option strike prices, expiration dates. It shows the returns on those based on the setup that we're seeing. I typically like to shoot for at least a 3-to-1 and typically a 4-to-1 return on the option trades. We did a few of those on this last bottom here in early March, and we had a number of those trades which worked out not too bad. And so I typically will do that after a 5-wave move to the upside or some strength. So don't like to trade options when we're grinding lower. I want to see some kind of initiation signal that we've struck kind of a bottom. I will trade options, put options if we hit resistance. Didn't do it here, but I think on this move here, I think we got short, if I'm not mistaken, on some option trades, or it may have been here. I don't remember. One of these two peaks we hit, we did a put trade, and it worked out fairly well after hitting some resistance. Please confirm spot over futures, usually bullish stocks, or was it the opposite? When in a bull market, spot is typically trading below futures. Can you pull up charts on TVX for targets? Okay, I've noticed this a lot in the VIX service. The TVX is not as accurate for determining targets when we're grinding lower because of the double decay. Once we get a 5-wave move to the upside, I can lay out some targets to the upside, but it's not very accurate for determining target price levels when it's grinding lower because of the double decay. So if we get a full 5 up, then I can lay out targets which are a little bit more accurate, but grinding lower, it really doesn't, it's not all that helpful. As we can see, it's almost at the all-time lows again here at 24.59, whereas the VXX is still significantly over those lows at this point in time, and that's again because of the double decay. So I don't like using the TVX for downside targets. I will lay out some upside targets when we get some strength because the decay is not as, it doesn't affect it as much. How do you factor VX in VXX contango? I don't. I rely on the fibs, and the fibs, it seems to adhere to the fibs regardless of the contango on the VXX. So everything seems to work out on the shorter time frames. Longer time frames it doesn't work so well, but 60 minutes and under, it adheres to the fibs fairly well, and we can see that here again. We're following our fib pinball pattern to the downside, even though we have contango built into it. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I've just seen this over the many years that I've been tracking this. It's followed our fibs, even to the downside, even with the contango. It works really well with our Elliott Wave fib pinball on the smaller time frames. Obviously, longer term chart, daily chart, it's not going to work very well, but shorter time frames, it does work. What's my opinion on VIX options? I prefer to use the VXX options because I can more clearly define price target levels. The VIX options are based on VIX Futures, so it's a little bit more difficult to determine ultimate price levels. I just prefer to use the VXX options. It's easier to determine targets with the VXX, in my opinion. What time frame do you look at for that 5-wave move? I look at all time frames. I look at all time frames all the way down to the 3-minute. It just kind of depends on what time frame is the most reliable as far as timing goes. VXSP, when should I go long? When we get a 5-wave move to the upside. So I'll note that in the VIX room when we get it. We don't have it just yet. I'm looking for one more low followed by a 5-wave move to the upside to give us confirmation that we have a bottom in place. Can I look at the UVXY to show comparable count? Again, UVXY, like the TVIX, is not as reliable as far as price patterns as the VXX because of the increased decay on that product. So once we do see a 5-wave move to the upside, then I can look at the UVXY along with TVIX to give us a upside price targets. But when it's moving to the downside, it's really not as reliable. All right, so that's so far the questions. Any other questions, folks? What is the time frame of the charts posted? Usually 60-minute always is the larger degree time frame, and smaller time frames will usually be somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes. It just kind of depends on which time frame is the most reliable on those smaller time frames, but usually 60-minute. So, okay, so it looks like that's it for the questions. Thank you everyone who's joined us, who's not part of the VIX service. We have a free trial, 15-day free trial if you want to give us a try. We do this video every week on Monday, usually right before the close. It's usually at 3:45 p.m. Eastern. We'll go over this video, open it up to questions. Again, we'll go over the VIX accounts on the VXX, the VIX, take a look at the SPX as well. Again, we have a free trial if you want to try the VIX service out for a week, for 15 days. Again, we go over the accounts of the VIX, and we also do trade alerts in that service as well. So again, thanks everyone for joining us. Please feel free to ask any questions that you were unable to ask here in the room during the week. I'm always happy to answer those questions. And thanks again, everyone. Have a great week.